Hi everyone, we're back again with another episode of the Discover New Music podcast. I'm absolutely delighted this week to be joined by Leoni Jane Kennedy, who has an absolutely massive future ahead of her in the industry. We recently featured her track Different Kind of Woman over on our Discover New Music playlist, so we can't wait to get chatting with her. Before then, though, it is the usual reminders from myself. If you would, please do follow Full Pelt on social media. We are on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. And again, if I could ask you, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening. But now it's time to get to the chat with Leonie, so let's go. Welcome, Leoni Jane Kennedy, to the Discover New Music podcast. Absolutely delighted to have you on this evening. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, all good here. Just very busy at the moment, keeping on my toes. I sort of thrive off of chaos, so it's all going well at the moment.
Yeah, I think on some level we all do thrive off a bit of chaos because it's what keeps life interesting. And it is an interesting time to get to talk to you because you've put out Different Kind of Woman, a track we're going to talk about in a moment, but there's a lot more to come, which hopefully we can tease out over the next sort of few minutes of this podcast. And first things first, regular listeners of the podcast will know we always start off with the same segment, and it's called the origin story. Now, I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm interviewing a band, and obviously there's a bit of a story about, well, how did the band get together, etc., etc. Obviously, I prefer when I'm talking to a solo artist because it's a lot more personal, really, and it's not that generic. Yeah, I saw an advert in the magazine or whatever it is, because obviously, your origin story, we could get quite deep and personal. We won't go all the way back to the beginning, but certainly from a musical perspective, what is the story of Leoni Jane Kennedy? How did you come to be in the position where you're releasing the music that you are? What is this origin story for you?
So I was brought up in Blackpool, and primarily, I guess, I'm sort of from a folk background. The Fylde Coast area was where I started playing as a kid, and every Thursday night for about 6 years, so from the ages of like from 11 till maybe 16, 17, I would play in my local pub, the Bernays, which is no longer with us, sadly. It was knocked down a few years ago, but I played in there every Thursday with a band called Barkin, and I was the house band, and it was a group of 6-year-old men playing classic rock, sort of the Beatles, Status Quo, Thin Lizzy, and the guitarist in that band, Pete Lawrenson, he basically used to press the guitar pedals for me. I was like this really small, skinny little 11-year-old kid, and trying out like a White Shade of Pale solo or something. And he would teach me his version of that solo because he went through glass and he had a bit of a problem with his hand because of it. So he came up with the solos in different ways. And his sort of style of playing is very influential to my playing as well, with his songwriting with this house band. Um, so he would press the pedals for me. I'd have this like really massive like maroon hollow body Gretsch that I'd be playing these solos on, and it'd be screaming because it's like a really small pub. Um, so you press the pedals, you get on with it, and then I just started songwriting from listening to his style of music as well. But the first band I ever saw live was Status Quo. I've always sort of been like a blues rock gal. But then I discovered Rush, and that sort of took my career into another direction as well. I've known Rush since I was a kid, like again 7 or 8 years old. Like I found a live video of them performing live at Pink Pop in '79, I believe. I didn't know until years later that there was another half of that song, but I fell in love with them immediately, like the most incredible prog rock band ever. I didn't really know what prog was at the time. So Rush introduced me to the likes of Yes, King Crimson, Genesis, all that sort of genre. So I guess in a way, everything has sort of come full circle because I did a tour for 2 years with a Rush tribute band called Moving Pictures, opening up, supporting them with my acoustic reinterpretation of Rush cover songs. I was speaking to someone about this earlier, actually. We came up with the idea of it being musical tapas. for the recreational side of the acoustic interpretations of these tracks. And I used to sit and watch the end of films where the cast would come up, and whatever song would be on, I'd incorporate whatever was playing and do it on the acoustic. So I'd be playing the drums, the bass, the guitar, but all just with my hands. Um, because I didn't know any different. I was just like, I'm recreating what I'm hearing. I'm not doing it specific to an instrument, and I guess that's kind of how the Rush thing came about as well. So I've veered off of the whole thing of origin stories, and I've gone into my whole career now. So just stop me if I if I go over.
No, it is really interesting because it, like you, it full circle all feeds into itself, doesn't it? Like you say, you come from kind of maybe a folk kind of area background, but obviously, have found this, fantastic genre of music, prog, all the bands that you listed, and just such a wonderful world to dive into that in some ways does marry up really well with folk. There's a lot of similarities, I think, between the two genres to some extent, and obviously can sense both of those radiating from the songs of yours that I've listened to actually. So it does, whilst you say you've sort of gone off piece slightly, it actually does give that background of where that sound of yours has developed. So no, really, really fascinating, and obviously, yeah, what a young age as well to sort of get out there and play in front of maybe not too many people, but I mean at that age, I'm sure playing in front of one person's scary enough. So I mean, yeah, quite a pedigree to have developed already. So yeah. Yeah, really interesting, and the Rush album as well that you touched on. Obviously, New World Woman it's called for listeners if you are not aware of it. And like you say, acoustic reinterpretations of Rush, who are a band that I guess they're a bit Marmite, aren't they, to some people? You either love them or hate them, and I lived with a chap when I was younger who was absolutely mad for them. So I had quite a feel of them at a younger age, and then didn't really listen to them for myself personally for quite a while. And actually, it was listening to some of your reinterpretations that just reminded me of, oh man, yeah, no, that was some really good tracks there that I've sort of slept on a bit, and I need to reinvest myself back into Rush a little bit. I feel, but yeah, a great thing to do. Obviously, something slightly unique and different to take a band such as that, reinterpret it the way you have, and put it out there. What was the kind of motivation for that? I know you said obviously you toured with a tribute band, which may well have factored into it, but to do it in the way you did, what was the motivation there?
The tour came afterwards.
Ah,
The tour was essentially off of the back of me doing that album because I worked with the guitarist of the tribute band,
mm.
Steve Brown, who runs Rush Fest Scotland, which is a charity event in aid of cancer research or whatever charity they choose, but it's in aid of raising awareness of whatever charity it is, with loads of Rush tribute bands and musicians getting together, normally at a place called Barris Art and Design in Glasgow. And that's what Steve runs, but he also has been in tribute bands of Rush for years. So I met Steve through my high school teacher, Owen de Power, which is John Power. So when I was in school, as a teenager, I was into all the Rush stuff anyway, but he sort of encouraged it a bit more so, because he was my art teacher, but also my music teacher, and he is the bass player in the Rush tribute band. So, give or take a couple of years, me going away to Guildford and being at uni. I think I was 19 when I went and played a Rush European convention. I think it was Rush Yukon. It was either in Chester or I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was a freezing venue. I remember that much. And it was the first time I'd met Steve because he was playing with Moving Pictures, which my teacher John Owen de Power, he is the bass player and the Geddy of that Rush tribute band. So I knew them all anyway, but that was the first time I met Steve, and we sort of stayed in touch anyway. And Steve's the manager of the Rush tribute band, so he heard me playing Kid Gloves, which is one of the songs that I chose to do for that first performance. At that point, I hadn't released any Rush covers. I just was there to celebrate Rush because I like them, and do a couple of Rush covers. I didn't think much of it. It was just a case of, do you want to do it? We've had you here when you were 14, doing my own original stuff. And I was like, yeah, go on then. So I did that and it just went down really, really well. And I think it's because I was doing the solo that Alex Lifeson does, but on the acoustic whilst bending the acoustic guitar and doing harmonics. So it was very much like, what the fuck's just happened for people who aren't too familiar with that style of playing, especially on a Rush track. So Steve saw that, his eyes lit up and was like, right, let's do something with that. So I was like, yeah, go on then. So I recorded that with Nick Andrew, who also went on to produce, assistant produce my originals album, Synthetic, which is all of these singles that are being released. This is all Nick's work and a guy called Elliot Kennedy, both of them, which we'll get into later because they totally saved my arse. But Nick produced at the time an acoustic version of Kid Gloves with me in his little studio in Fleet because my Mac completely gave in and I couldn't record it at home. And he happened to know Steve. So Steve introduced me, we got recording through that way. And then from that, I was put on one of the songs for Neil's albums, which is a tribute album in collaboration with all sorts of tribute bands from across the world that Steve puts together, sells copies of, and all that money goes to the charity, similar to Rush Fest Scotland. It's just a physical copy and it's different reinterpretations. So my interpretation of Kid Gloves went on that originally, and then since then, I've been on a couple of others, but that's how the New World Woman thing came about. I sort of thought about doing an album of these reinterpreted tracks. I'm not actually sure which version of that I wanted to use. So I put all of it together and thought, I'll make a playlist, I'll see which ones are doable, and I'll see which ones I'm brave enough to attempt for one, but also brave enough to put out there, knowing how I don't want to say, I don't really know what I want to say about the Rush audience because they're
Passionate.
absolutely, yeah, passionate is a word. And two, right, as a Rush fan myself, I totally agree. If you're um gonna do something, either do it completely different or do it in a way that respects the original song. And that's all that I ever tried to do with it. Um, and again, being a Rush fan, I never wanted to take away from the original. If anything, I wanted to enhance the song. Like my mum listens to Rush now because of the acoustic reinterpretations. Um, and like I said before, it's a case of me listening to the track and using all of the elements that stand out to me when I listen that I'm singing along to. It's not often that you sing along to a bass line or a drum line for just generic music, but for this, it's very much a part of the identity of the song. So I fill in on the acoustic a bass line to take me through to the next verse for Open Secrets, for example. Um, and that's like it's a riff. It's a riff. It's not a chord. I'm not just playing chords over Rush. I'm doing the whole shebang, you know? So I wanted to show the world how I hear Rush and how I would put it together. And I think I got away with it.
Yeah, I would say you more than got away with it. That's a absolutely fantastic and fascinating listen. Really is, and obviously, listeners, I like to plug throughout my podcast, and that'll be the first one for today. Is if you haven't listened to a New World Woman for some reason, definitely go and do that. But next plug is going to be obviously the single that we're going to focus on. So the single that we've put on our accompanying playlist, and that is "Different Kind of Woman," which is just a fantastic introduction to Leoni, I think. I've caught you live once before, so I've heard a mixture of the Rush songs and and some of your own work in the past. I'm looking forward to obviously getting into the album in a second and seeing what is coming along the way. But I think this is a great track to kind of lead the wave of music that is going to be coming. And obviously, we always ask a similar sort of question with the song we've played on the playlist, and it's very simple. What can you tell us about the song? How did it come together for you? How did you put it into practice?
Sure. This is a good segue back into speaking about Nick Andrew and Elliot Kennedy, actually. So I was at university and I was starting up with my band. We recorded a live version of a lot of these tracks, inclusive of other ones that won't actually be featured, with a lad called John Gallen. who was the T-boy for Queen back in the day, but he also produced Uriah Heep, Motorhead. He did a lot of good stuff, but he was a part of ACM as the producer, and he offered to put us in a live room and record some live stuff. It sounded epic, but it was live, and I didn't want it to just be live. I wanted it to go into a full production. So John was amazing. He did such a good job with it. It will come out at some point down the line, but I wanted to produce it like fully. So I went into a studio with someone else who I will not name because he majorly messed me around basically for a couple of years. I was in deep shit because he would not give me the recordings that I worked on for months with my band that I paid him in cash, no receipt, no nothing. Um, and for every month for about a year, I was messaging him saying, I need a demo, man. Like, just give me something that I know, I'm excited to listen to. And he's like, no, we're busy, I'll get it to you when I get it to you.
Hmm.
And it was a year down the line, and it got to December after recording like around this time now in March. And I basically had to get the higher powers to sort of help me out. Eventually, we got the stuff back. It was missing the majority of the material that we really worked on and that we put a lot of time into. Um, but I had the foundation of the album. So I took a couple of months. I was listening to it. I was thinking, what am I gonna do? I'm really, this was it. It was going somewhere. It was the version of it that I wanted it to be. But then this happened and it just completely threw me off. And it's difficult enough as it is for being a musician and having a career and you feel like you're not worth anything, and then someone does something like that. But then you get people like Elliot Kennedy and Nick Andrew who step in and save the day. So Nick spent months with me. I was around at his studio in Fleet until 6 in the morning, going over the guitar parts, redoing the vocal tracks. We basically took all of the foundation and sort of smothered it in everything else that we could, to make it better and to completely cover up the shit that was on there before, so to speak. Um, and then Elliot produced it. So Nick sorted the majority of the recordings out, and then Elliot did his whole magical mixing and mastering things. He's worked with the Spice Girls and Gary Barlow and stuff. It was a mutual friend, we've been friends for a few years, and we've just spoken on Facebook. And he spoke with my mum a couple of times because she was into his original music. And I think at the time he didn't realize. He did say, like, I'm up for this, let me help you. But I don't think he quite realized at the time that it was a whole album of like sort of progressive new wave rock stuff. But he loved it, and they both did. And Nick is a fantastic guitarist in his own right, and he helped me with my sound, and a lot of the solos. He was like, just put your own spin on it. Don't be afraid. Don't just do something because you think it's fast. Put some feel into it. He really stripped me back and made me look at my playing. Um, so long story short, like it just wouldn't have been as amazing as it is now if it wasn't for that messing up and for these people coming in and saving the day. And I'm so grateful that it happened because it's taught me a lot as well. But this track, Different Kind of Woman, I did the music video to this with JJ Eringer, who I met through the Anchoress because I play guitar for her, and
Hmm.
JJ's done some of her videos as well. Um, and he was fantastic. He was brilliant, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And the whole concept of the music video was to match the guitars to the personalities, and that's kind of what the song is about. Because at the time of writing this, this was before I even started working with John to do the live recordings. I wrote it when I was in uni, so I was maybe 18, 19. Um, and what are we now? I'm 25 this year, so that's how long it's been. And I'm finally getting it out, and it feels good. But the original track was me talking about the different kind of woman that I needed to be at the time. And now I am that woman. And I would never have imagined all of this had to happen for me to realize that. So to kick it off like this for me is like, I wouldn't have chosen another song. I think it really sort of lines up my worth. And, like I said before, it's very difficult and you can sort of cringe at your own ego sometimes when you're doing stuff like this as a musician. It just feels like you're wearing your heart on your sleeve even when you don't really have a choice with it. Um, but I've always sort of been that personality anyway. I'll talk for days. I'm a northerner, like before I was brought up in pubs, so I was speaking to plenty of people from a young age. It's not something that I'm not familiar with, but I am an introvert at heart. And at the time, I was even more of an introvert. The only reason I was going out was because I was having a Guinness at the bar, and then I would be all right. Um, I I think I spoke with someone about this. The original origin of that song when I was writing it was because a guy that I liked at the time, I was trying to get his attention by changing my clothes, by changing my hair, by looking at what other people that he found interesting, not necessarily attractive, but what he thought was interesting in another person. That was me trying it out for my own identity and trying to figure out, do I like this? And eventually, no, I didn't. I ended up becoming the person that I am now and kind of looking back on it and going, I changed for someone else, but in that process, I realized what I didn't like. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, but it is quite a sad song in a way if you look at it from another perspective of all of that's had to happen and now I'm here doing this.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that is so insightful. I mean, life is a journey, and there's ups and downs along the way. And I mean that song kind of encapsulates all of that in one. So it is, yeah, such a meaningful song for you as a person, obviously, Leonie, and hopefully something that a lot of people can perhaps understand, relate to, and sort of take something from that as well when they listen to it, which is what is obviously the best thing about music, I feel. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. I'm really glad as well you touched on the music video because I love music videos, talk about music videos on this podcast all the time. And I didn't realize. JJ Oringa is actually a name that comes up so often because I often ask bands about the videos that are behind the songs that I'm talking to them about. And I've noticed JJ's name so much on a lot of the videos that I love. So, I mean, again, another video that I can add to that catalogue because I love the video for Different Kind of Woman. The visuals in there are really stunning. And you must be really happy with how it came out, I would assume.
Honestly, I've I love it so much and it was just typical that we chose the standard like first music video to be in the woods. Because it seems like everyone has one of those, but this is different, It feels different. I think the style that JJ has, he's got such a good eye, and every single angle that he's chosen for this makes me feel like a bit of a rock star, Like I don't ever feel like that. And I was so self-conscious about doing this whole thing. Um, and there's parts of it where I'm like, oh, look at me here, look at me there. And then JJ comes around the corner and he's like, you don't need to worry about that. Nobody's going to see that. He's very calming. He's great to work with. I need to message him actually because we're planning the next one. We're going to do another shoot later this month for the third track actually, that I'm releasing because I'm hoping to do a music video per single for all of these, which is going to be hectic because I'm
Yeah.
actually the second single Closer that's coming out on the 29th of March. I'm doing that one myself in my bedroom with Premiere Pro and I'm doing it to challenge myself and it's actually really good. I'm surprised it's no JJ standard, which is why I'm sandwiching it in between two of his to make me look worse. But no, it's good fun, I'm having a good time. I obviously would prefer to have JJ, but with the sort of time frame that I'm keeping to for the sake of momentum and algorithms and all that sort of stuff. Um, I think this is a good challenge to have. Like I was talking to my stage dad, my teacher, um, not long before I was on here with you, and we were saying about progress and looking back at yourself and going, if you can't actually document the progress that you're making, it's going to be really difficult to see how far you've come. Um, so I'm using this as a bit of an ego tester, a personality tester, and trying to just do everything myself for this music video to prove either that I can or I can't. And we'll see how it goes. But I'm sticking to like themes per song as well. So for Different Kind of Woman, because of the scenery, it was green. And this one is very purple. So we'll see how that goes. I've got like a load of LEDs that I keep up for doing the Instagram videos and things that you see generic guitarists doing, and I'm like, oh, I've got to start doing that now because everyone's doing it. But I keep the purple in the background or I keep the green in the background to make it look consistent and things like that. Well thought out.
It is well thought out, and I love that. I've picked up on. I mean, literally the last interview I did, talked a lot with the guest around the aesthetic that the band is sort of creating, and I think it is so important in this day and age to have those extra layers to back up the music, and that's again something I think music videos are fantastic for, always have been, is just to add that extra sort of dynamic to the sounds that you're hearing. And absolutely love the fact that you're going to be doing a video for each of the singles, because I always call it a dying art, and it is a dying art. I hate when I speak to a guest and I look and there's not a video to talk about. So I mean, obviously absolutely amazing that you're doing that, and I'm sure the video for Close is going to come out looking, JJ-esque. I'm sure it's going to be good. And obviously, you touched on Closer. We touched on the albums. I mean, Closer's out on the 29th of this month of March. And obviously, listeners can already go and pre-save the single, which is always really a helpful thing to do. What can they expect from this next track from the album?
So Closer was something I wrote during lockdown. And the whole theme that I touched on with the music video, what I've been doing so far with it, is putting myself back in that lockdown mental state because obviously everyone was very isolated for obvious reasons. And for me, it was about reconnecting with the outside world. Even as an introvert, it felt very isolating. And it was about, yeah, just reconnecting with not necessarily the people, but yourself as a member of a sort of society, and feeling included in something that was outside of your peripheral vision, I guess. Um, and it was that whole sort of daring thing that was like, we're not meant to go outside. We're not allowed to go outside. We shouldn't go outside. But what happens if we do? Well, obviously you'll get fucking corona probably, but the idea is it's that push and pull of will I, won't I, should I not? Um, the hook line in it is step closer. I want to feel alive again because there was an element of just complete deadness, complete silence. Um, and I think that was the worst part about it was how quiet it was, which I do like quiet. I don't like noise. I have noise cancelling headphones for that reason. But at that time, I just remember it being so quiet that it was loud. And that's the whole concept of the song. So for this video and for the promotion, I'm not wearing any makeup for the music video. I'm not wearing anything fancy. I'm not leaning into, I'm fully lockdown mode. And it's the same for this interview. I know it's a podcast, but I'm not doing makeup for this whole sort of period of it because I don't know, I guess I'm an artist and it feels relevant. Um, so yeah, I hope that makes sense.
That does. Sadly, it's a period of time we all lived through, and obviously, yeah, we'd all rather forget about it, to be honest. But every day things remind us of it, and yeah, no, look forward to listening to the song, and obviously looking forward to the album. Absolutely, is going to be great. Listeners, obviously need to stay on top of everything that's coming, and the best way to do that is we touched on Instagram with social media, and I always give out the social handles. They'll pop up on the screen, hopefully. And it's just a bit of a tradition, even though in 2025, I'd like to think people are savvy enough to find them without me, but I like to do it. So, Instagram listeners, you can find Leoni at Leoni Jane Kennedy. Again, I did say pretty simple there. Um, Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it, if anyone's still on there, Leoni J Kennedy. And then on Facebook is LJK Music. So
Mhm.
there will be links in the bio. Listeners, do click through, give Leonie a follow because, as we say, Close is out on the 29th of March. We've got an album on the way. And with all of that, normally as well would come live shows. So you can obviously stay up to date with wherever Leonie is going to be playing, which does include a support slot for Solstice, a great prog band that I saw you're going to jump on a few of their shows coming up. So you must be looking forward to those shows.
Oh yeah, totally. I'll be doing some BVs with the main band, and Andy Glass is he's got me on guitar as well for four of the tracks. Um, and then we're doing a couple of little sneaky electric numbers together as well, so it should be a really good time. I've just been told as well that I'm going to Maastricht with them in May for Midsummer Prog Fest, which is going to be epic. It's a festival I've always wanted to play, so that'll be really cool. But I'm with the Anchoress as well in April after solstice, I think. And that'll be the 9th till the 13th with solstice, and then sort of the rest of that month with the Anchoress. And we're supporting the Manic Street Preachers at Shepherd's Bush Empire for 2 nights as well. Which I mean, I've seen Kiefer Sutherland play there. I'm buzzing. That's going to be epic. It's a huge venue.
Oh, absolutely! It's a fantastic venue, Shepherd's Bush, and obviously, and Cress. I'm a big fan as well. But and for me, Mannix have always been like one of my bands, if you will. So I mean, that is definitely going to be a night to remember, or 2 nights to remember. So yeah, lots there for obviously listeners. Jump on any of that if you can. Um, the last section of the podcast follows sort of me touching on the live side of things, and it's something called setlist science. So I touched on earlier, I'm a bit of a music video geek. I'm also a geek when it comes to set lists. I love to see what bands are playing, the order they're playing them in, and sort of tracking, bands that I've seen live and what they've played and all that kind of stuff. So I like to throw this little section in. First question of it is simply, how much importance do you place into the structure of your set lists, and have you got any rules that you tend to follow?
God. Okay. That's quite interesting. I've never been asked that before. So I tend to think about it relative to what my guitar is tuned to, because a lot of my tracks are drop D on the E string, the lower E string. Um, So, for example, if I do a Rush cover, the majority of times I don't do that in drop D because it's fucking hard enough as it is in standard. So I will sandwich that in between. And I've only just started using a tuner as well, which I know is ridiculous and people will kill me for it. But my stage dad, Owen, he bought me a tuner for Christmas and it's the best thing I've ever been given in my life. But I do the set list according to the tuning. I'll open it up with something in standard, then I'll play something in standard. Um, Depending on the vibe of the song and what the audience is giving me, I'll throw a couple things in there and then retune to standard and then drop D. I think it is important because you want to create a bit of a up and down curve so that they're riding the wave with you. But again, it depends on the audience. I think for me doing acoustic stuff a lot of the time, it's good to start off with something punchy that kicks them in the face and goes, listen to me. And then drop the mood down a little bit, give them something that's a bit heartwarming. And then absolutely devastating. That's it, you're in hell. There's no coming back from this. And then give them something that's like, oh, nice, I'm happy again now, you know? And then the Rush cover. And then finish off with the big prog screamy one.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I've picked up on there that I love the most is the fact that obviously you're very in tune with the audience, and you're trying to see how they're reacting and potentially tailoring what you're doing based off of that. I know it's easier for obviously when you're solo acoustic versus a big band that are on a set tour, but I do love bands that will mix it up a little bit because more often than not bands will play the same set list throughout an entire tour, and I get why it's easier, you understand what you're doing, but I just think for me there's a couple of bands this week actually in the next few weeks that I'm going to be seeing multiple times on the same tour, and I know that I'm going to be watching the same set, and I'd rather they actually mix it up a little bit. But it is what it is. I mean, yeah, certainly, yeah, love that, and yeah, you sort of pass the test, as it were, for obviously having your finger on the pulse when it comes to set lists. So the sort of second part of the or last part of the segment is something we added in about a year or so ago when it became a bit of an internet meme, and it is literally just encores either for yourself or when you're attending shows. Yes or no?
Oh God. Oh, I don't know. Um, I think it depends on the band, and the venue. Because if I've got to get on a tube and I'm at the O2 Arena and it's someone who I'm not particularly that bothered about, or I just wanted to hear them play that one song, I'll go before they do the encore because I want to catch that tube. But if it was Rush, I would stay until the tech guys left.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen Rush. I managed to see them with the poster behind me, actually. It's the Taylor Hawkins tribute band, the tribute day
Hmm.
that they held at Wembley Arena. I saw Geddy and Alex perform there. But other than that, and Geddy's book tour, And I have never seen Rush with Neil Peart, and I was absolutely devastated when he passed away.
Yeah.
So I guess for an encore for Rush, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I'm not entirely for or against it. It just depends on the band.
And I get lots of different answers, and I have probably fallen eventually, personally, uh, along the same mindset as you. That it does depend on the band, depends on the venue. I mean, yeah, the tube at the O2 is a pain in the backside. But yeah, obviously, yeah, Rush, absolutely. I mean, I never got to see Rush. They're one of the very few bands. I mean, I go to a ridiculous amount of gigs, and I've seen pretty much everyone that I would want to see. Never got to see Rush. I mean, yeah, if Rush, we could get in a time machine together and go and see Rush. They could play all night for all we care. But yeah, encores, yeah, take them or leave them, but they're definitely on the dependent on the artist and the venue for me. So yeah, absolutely fascinating answers again, Leonie, to that. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk with you on the podcast. And listeners, again, so much to get invested in with Leonie coming up. If you haven't heard Different Kind of Woman, absolutely check out that single and the video as well, and obviously see what is coming out in the pipeline over the next few months with the album and everything. That was my final message for the listeners. I always give the final message over to the guest host. So Leonie, what would be your final message for the listeners today?
Thank you for listening. See you at a gig. Get some merch. I've got like 5 vinyl left of New Old Woman. Have a good time. Don't be a dick.
Brilliant final message. Absolutely love that. No, thank you so much, Leonie, for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for your time. Cheers.
Well, I really do hope you enjoyed that chat there with Leonie. Do make sure you follow her across social media to stay up to date with everything coming from her. And while you're there, give Full Pelt a follow. We're on Facebook at Full Pelt and on Twitter and Instagram at Full Pelt Music. Finally, from me, if you would, please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, wherever you're watching or listening, because we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Discover New Music podcast.